Thank you all for joining us for the Q&A today on plant-based diets. I'm your host, Veronica Winkler, and I am a regional lead dietitian with FoodSmart, based out of Virginia. Joining me today, you will hear Claire. She is going to be manning our Q&A and chats, so please be sure to be adding in your questions there along the way, and we will get to your questions later on. I promise we will get to those questions that you have later in our session and those that you've inputted prior to our session as well, just debunking some different items of our plant-based eating. But first, I would love to introduce you all to FoodSmart, just for those of you who may be new to us. So FoodSmart makes eating well simple, and we do that through personalized nutrition. We believe that food is a powerful tool in creating a healthy life, and we want to make it easy for you all. So making easy choices that will support your health goals. The way that we can do this is through our one-on-one nutrition visits with registered dietitians, just like myself, to provide you with a personalized plan that is custom tailored to your own lifestyle. So your dietitian will listen to your medical and family history, get to know your food preferences, your cooking abilities, take into account your food budget, and so many more pieces that you'll go into just to give you that personalized nutrition care that will actually work for you. So your dietitian will also set you up with our FoodSmart app. So you can see that on the left-hand screen here. And there's going to be lots of features that you all can talk through, going through different thousands of chef-curated recipes with dietitian in mind. We have a customizable meal planner, which will make just those day-to-day meals easier to plan for. We have our in-app grocery ordering access, and just so much more that we have to offer to make eating well easy and at the top of your mind, but also your wallet with some of our budget-friendly solutions. For those of you on this webinar today, we are giving you a $15 Visa gift card after you complete your first visit with a registered dietitian. So in order to be eligible for this, please use the code you see on the screen here. It's PLANTS when scheduling. So that's going to be to schedule. You can go to foodsmart.com/schedule to sign up for your visit. So now we are ready to kind of dive into what we'll talk about in our discussion today. I will say this webinar is being recorded and the video will be sent out to you early next week, just for you to stream anytime and be able to look through some of the tips that we've shared. So you don't have to scurry and take notes along the way. We will be providing this afterwards. But in preparation for today's call, we went through some of the questions that you all submitted ahead of time and grouped them into just some common themes we saw. So if you don't hear your specific question being called out, please don't worry. It will probably be answered sometime throughout our presentation. So as far as what we are going to be covering and some common themes, these are going to be just what are the different types of plant-based diets? What are benefits of having more plants in your routine? How to get enough nutrients on a plant-based diet, and how to maintain your regular lifestyle once you go plant-based. So that poll will carry us right into our first topic of just what are going to be these different types of plant-based eating and diets that we have. So the four main types that we'll go through today will be vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, and flexitarian. What these all will have in common is that plants are going to be kind of the main focus of the meals instead of meat, which is typically the norm in the American society. So starting with a vegan diet, this is the one I'd say most people would think of when they hear plant-based eating. A vegan diet will not include any form of animal products. So we would not have any traditional meats, seafood, eggs, or dairy. But could even capture things such as honey, because that does require animals to produce. So to prove that plant-based meals can also look and taste delicious, we'll be sharing a couple FoodSmart recipes That will coincide with each diet pattern. So for our vegan diet here, our plant-based recipe will be our smoked paprika roasted eggplant. Our next eating style will be a vegetarian style. So our vegetarians will still eat eggs and dairy products, but they will not include the traditional meat or seafood. The recipe we have to match up with our vegetarians will be our mushroom stroganoff. So this particular recipe may not contain meat, but it does have sour cream. So that's why it would fit into the vegetarian style and not the traditional vegan. Next, we have pescatarians. So our pescatarians will still eat seafood and fish, but they would continue to exclude things like red meat, poultry. It goes back and forth. Some may be eating eggs and dairy products, but that will be up to the individual there. And dishes like our shrimp and kimchi fried rice will give this pescatarian lifestyle the chance to have lots of protein, fiber, and probiotics. And then the last style here will be flexitarian. So this is probably one of the newer terms, as I mentioned, but what most people are looking to categorize themselves as. So our flexitarians eat predominantly plant-based diet, but they may occasionally eat some meat, seafood, or dairy. But plants do continue to be that main focus of their diet. So they don't stick to a strictly vegan or vegetarian lifestyle. So for example, in our mushroom and noodle soup recipe, it happens to be vegetarian. But no, for our flexitarians, maybe one night you might want to swap in some egg noodles instead of rice noodles, so it's no longer vegan. Or maybe you want to add in some shrimp or some beef, just to give it a new flavor profile. That would fit into most of our flexitarian style. So using a label for your diet, it can be helpful just to provide those parameters on what you're going to be eating most of the time, but also understand life happens. You could be strictly vegan for majority of the year, but let's say Thanksgiving is coming around and you still want to be able to enjoy that turkey with your family, and that is perfectly fine. So I like to point out that plant-based is not going to equal plants only. If it helps to use some type of a different term to classify your way of thinking, maybe plant forward would be a more appropriate for you. Just a great way to describe your emphasis on having more fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and just making it not just an all or nothing diet. So now that we know a bit more about the different ways that plant-based can look, why would someone choose a plant-based diet? So let's go through some of these benefits of eating a plant-based diet. So there are going to be many more benefits, but just for the sake of time, brought it down to four main topics here. So these would be from the health benefit side of things, having it be more cost effective, the convenience aspect as well, and also having it be environmentally friendly. So we're going to go into each one of these a bit more. Eating a diet that is rich in our vegetables will allow our emphasis to be on the fiber of food. Also looking into things like the hydration, vitamins and minerals, and just the overall decreased intake of saturated fats, which is great for prioritizing our heart health. So eating a predominantly plant-based diet has been shown to also help with different digestive issues, can help lower your cholesterol levels and decrease that overall risk for cardiovascular disease, which is just wonderful to have all of those items in our favor with the power of plants. Some individuals may also notice weight loss by switching to a plant-based diet, but that's not necessarily the primary goal when making that switch. I do like to bring up about our fake meats and meat alternatives because this has been a very common question I've been getting as a dietitian. And as you go through the grocery store, you may see there are just so many alternatives out there for just about any product you can think of. But the question comes of, are they actually better for me than the real thing? So I like just as a blanket statement that a majority of the time, plant-based options are going to be healthier over our animal products. there are going to be some plant-based options out there that can be very ultra processed and high in sodium and saturated fats. So just be educated when looking for your alternatives. I do encourage you to review the ingredient labels for all of your products, but especially those alternatives. Looking for things that have our whole ingredients. So this may come in the form of black beans, quinoa, oats, maybe mushrooms. Those would be things you want to feature more of. But if your product label is saying maybe more food isolates or extracts, it could be a sign that your product is highly processed. So just something to have on your radar. To get the most health benefits of a plant-based diet, though, it's best to stick to our whole minimally processed foods. All right, so there is also a misconception that eating a vegan or vegetarian diet is going to be very expensive. But something just to kind of think of mind when you're grocery shopping is consider how expensive your beef and just other meats have been at the store recently. And during this time of year, we have our summer produce, which is seasonally priced. Whereas with our traditional animal proteins, those aren't necessarily going to change from a seasonality standpoint like the way a vegetable would. So, getting the same amount of protein from plant based sources like a tofu, maybe beans, lentils, rice, will just be a fraction of the cost because we can take into account seasonality. I do challenge you all to try maybe 1 week of purely plant-based grocery shopping and just seeing how that compares to your normal grocery bill. And oftentimes that should come with money savings. If you're eating away from the home, maybe at a Chipotle, a veggie bowl, which would include that beloved guac, is almost $5 cheaper than a steak bowl with guac as well. So sometimes just eating out may be more expensive, like having the Beyond Beef patty might be a couple dollars more, or an additional charge for a splash of oat milk in your morning coffee. But if you're focusing on cooking your whole food and plant-based meals, it will be much cheaper for you in the long run. As far as cooking meals at home, being plant-based doesn't have to be hard, and I like to definitely emphasize that. If you start with simple recipes with just a few ingredients, you'll be able to master your kitchen in no time. There is going to be an element of trial and error with everything in cooking, so please give yourself some grace. That if one time you make a recipe with broccoli and it just does not go well, that doesn't mean that all broccoli has to be bad. Continue trying a new cooking method or a new seasoning, and don't give up there. But also keep in mind when you're trying a new recipe, don't look into making a recipe that the main ingredient is one you know you don't like. So if mushrooms are not for you, please do not try our mushroom stroganoff. So be practical with yourself and just give your time that grace and the ability to develop some cooking skills so you feel your most confident self. Another area of plant-based eating that's been getting a lot more attention recently has been its ability to reduce an individual's carbon footprint and just being good for the environment. So our animals, they do require a lot of resources, especially water, to be able to produce and allow them to grow. So the manufacturing process of meat, it's also going to take a huge toll on the environment. So just keeping that in mind, but also some of our plant-based alternatives are not going to be created equal. So almonds that are going to go into our almond milk do require a ton of water to grow, but maybe oats that go into our oat milk aren't going to require hardly any water. So this graph will have a nice little description and visual of the different usage and in greenhouse gas emissions for each protein source that you have. So just reducing that amount of meat and dairy you eat, even if it's just a couple nights a week, is going to make a huge difference for our environment as well. So now let's go through some of the huge misconceptions about eating plant-based. Such questions I get are, how am I going to get the essential nutrients if I'm not eating your traditional meat. So protein has recently been emphasized, I'd say, in the marketing world as being the most important macronutrient for being healthy. However, there is going to be a threshold of protein that our body needs that many of us exceed on a daily basis. So that being said, we really don't need as much protein as many of us think. And despite what many of you have heard, there's a large variety of protein sources coming directly from plants that you'll be able to rotate throughout the week to get that variety piece and meet your mark that's specific for you. Different areas you can mix in could be nuts and nuts butters, maybe seeds, different legumes. You can trial tofu, tempeh, quinoa, and even just some traditional fruits and vegetables that could be containing protein as well. But just remember, even Popeye got his protein from spinach, so it is possible with a plant-based diet. Other questions I get is going to be direct supplementation. So some specific areas I'll talk through today will be on our vitamin B12, calcium, and iron. I am going to reference these more as a general population, but knowing that meeting one-on-one with a dietitian would have you better informed as far as maybe what supplement would or would not be indicated for your routine. So if you are still enjoying dairy products, you're oftentimes intaking dairy just as regularly as someone who's following a traditional diet. So therefore, you'd be getting enough calcium. In the case of the vegan diet, so that would be one without the traditional dairy products, you should really prioritize your calcium-rich plant-based foods. So these are things like broccoli, dark leafy greens, our beans, some nuts, as well as we have different calcium fortified foods. This could be milk alternatives, tofu, tempeh. So you can still get a lot of calcium there. And then, but if an individual doesn't enjoy dairy at baseline or maybe doesn't tolerate it, that could be an indication for having a calcium supplement. Iron will be another area we want to focus in on. There are both heme and non-heme sources of iron. So in the case of plant-based eating, the non-heme sources would be prioritized. And this could come in the form of beans, whole grains, tofu, lots of options there. And the heme sources are only going to be found through animal products. In both cases, our iron-rich foods are best absorbed when paired with a little bit of vitamin C. So nice to know that there is a best way to maximize that. Most individuals are able to get enough iron intake through their diet alone. But for those who may be pregnant, it would be best to have additional supplementation just to help with that overall daily intake. But kind of for the general population, that would not be the increase. There would be an increase in iron needs, not just specific for those having a plant-based diet. The next item would be our vitamin B12. This is going to be an essential part of all diets, but the number one is lacking in a plant-based diet. So if an individual is still eating eggs, they're getting a strong source of B12, but their overall intake may still be low. So other sources to increase your B12 intake can come in fortified cereals, nutritional yeast, if you've all ever heard of that, and some plant-based milk. But if you're not regularly consuming those foods, I would recommend having some form of a supplementation of B12 at an increased level from the general population's DRI, because vitamin B12 is not regularly absorbed. As far as the overall picture for planning your meals, it's nice to focus on this balanced plate, getting enough protein, carbs, and fat. So it's not just going to be the protein source we're looking at. We want to focus in on that fiber and what we can add to your plate. So nice visual here, and there's so many different varieties on how we can plan your meals, but knowing that with the emphasis on fiber will allow you to stay fuller longer. And it'll also be really great for improving overall gut health and promoting regular bowel movements. So this will bring us to our last topic of just how can I stay aligned with my current lifestyle while being plant-based. So plant-based can seem like a life-changing move, but many things you're already eating are going to be categorized into this eating style at baseline. Um, I would say if your family is a bit turned off from the term vegan, just try starting small with your current meals, slightly increasing that vegetable portion while decreasing your overall animal-based protein portion on your plate. Once you get the go ahead from your family on that, you can maybe introduce just one night a week of plant-based eating. But pair it with foods you know your family already really enjoys, so it's not that newness factor that could be a bit scary for them. The other area is if your partner may not be willing to give up meat, maybe try planning meals that have the same core base, but you can have two different protein options just to meet everyone's preferences for that meal. And of course, don't force them into eating something that they don't enjoy, like Michael is forcing Kevin here. So, always a funny visual to keep in mind. When it comes to kids having a plant-based diet, I do just want you to know that if there is the planned out and balanced meal in mind, it would be appropriate for all stages of development. But areas specifically we would want to focus in on would be our just overall calorie intake, healthy fats, and adequate protein to support growth. So this would be perfectly fine to still have a plant-based diet with that approach. The other area is how can I eat out with being a vegan or vegetarian? Um, in this case, approach your menu of thinking of ways of how you can maximize your veggie intake. So many places have a lot of veggie-centric appetizers. These could come with like the Brussels sprouts, maybe green bean fries, or cauliflowers become very popular. Or you can start your meal with a side salad. That way you have that veggie intake to start off with. And just be sure to ask if there's any cooking methods or preparation items that you want to keep in mind. But knowing that a lot of restaurants are having plant-based alternatives, which is just a great movement as they're seeing more and more demand. Okay, so now that we have some facts here, how can we get started on a plant-based diet? When deciding to go plant-based, there are two main things just to keep in mind. The first one, take it slow. It could start off with, as we talked about, just maybe one meal a week or just slowly increasing that protein. That could definitely be something that's great for works for your family. But then the second, making sure that we're creating a balanced plate for something that still gives you enough energy to take on your day. So going too far in one extreme can just make you not feel your best. So we want to make sure that not only are we having plant-based, but we're also having different balancing out with that act. So let's talk a bit more about why working with a dietitian can help, especially in that transition period. So having a dietitian on your side is having a built-in cheerleader. I will be your biggest fan, as will other dietitians in our network, just making sure you feel supported on this health journey. So we are by no means here to tell you and be the food police or shame you for any slip ups. We want to make sure that we're helping you make these behavior changes, as it can be a huge adjustment. So how can we take things, the slow changes on the day-to-day basis to make the big results? So please just go ahead and take the first step in creating a more plant-based lifestyle by scheduling your visit with a Food Smart dietitian. To do that, you can follow the link of foodsmart.com/schedule. And as I referenced at the beginning, if you use the code PLANTS, you can get $15 Visa gift card after you complete your first session with the dietitian. So some main takeaways, just know that plant-based diet doesn't have to be all or nothing. A plant-based diet, it has many health effects, not just for ourselves, but also from a savings perspective and for the environment. It is totally possible to get enough protein on a plant-based diet, but keeping that balanced plate in mind so that we can focus in on the fiber and healthy carbs. But really also starting slow with just one day per week of healthy meals, in plant-based meals. So with that in mind, if we want to pick a couple questions that we can answer.
I see a good one here. How do you reduce anti-nutrients in plant foods, things like lectins, phytates, and oxalates?
Yeah, great question there. One that's coming to mind where a lot of those items are going to be found would be like our legumes and our nuts, making sure that you are soaking those because that could be a form of digestion in itself, letting a lot of those different constituents break down so that it's going to be less work on your system and not going to be as much on your, especially your digestive health. So that's a great area is encouraging to having them soak or if time doesn't allow, the Instapot does wonders in being able to do take some of those dried items and make them easier for us to digest.
Awesome. And I see another good one here. What are good whole food options that are low in carbs?
Yeah, so different whole foods, especially if you're making like a homemade bean patty or something to be able to have an alternative there. Mushrooms are a great alternative. They have a really great texture and jack filled with nutrition, but they're going to be low in carbohydrates. Other areas that you can add in would be things like zucchini or squash. Really easy to shred them into some of your favorite casseroles or, like I said, patties. And not only are they going to be having more of a whole food approach, they also help with that dryness factor that may come through with cooking. So it's great to have those non starchy vegetables on your side. But also know that carbohydrates are our friend. They are our energy source and our body's preferred source of fuel. So making sure that even if we are having carbohydrates, if they're coming from a high quality source, that would be just fine to feature in your diet.
Awesome. And I know we're a little bit over, so I apologize if anyone needs to jump off. That's totally fine, but let's just choose two more. How do I know that I'm balancing correctly the food with enough protein, fat, carbs to make it nutritional and I'm not missing out on anything?
Yeah, and that's a great question there, and where I would really encourage you to schedule a session with your Food Smart dietitian. That's going to enable you to get the most individualized nutrition rather than it be more so the general public recommendations, knowing what would be most appropriate for your activity level, your age, your gender, just different factors there to keep in mind so that we can really calculate those numbers that would be most appropriate for you.
Awesome. And then we'll do this as the last one. What are some good sources of whole foods that are easy to make?
Yeah, good sources of whole foods, and something that would be nice in year round. I think of the legume source. Anything like a lentil or a bean is really easy to fixture or to fix right into your routine, especially if you're used to a more traditional meat. Instead of making your meatloaf, why not try a lentil meatloaf? Or if you want to try some type of tacos that maybe you would have ground beef in, let's try a tempeh taco this go around. So just taking that mentality of a recipe that's already kind of in your wheelhouse, but maybe we can just sub with the protein. So that way we have the stable areas within the meal, but we're able to swap out the protein source to give you that variety.
Awesome. I think that's all we can take for questions right now. You want to close us out, Veronica?
Yeah, well, thank you all for joining today, asking such great questions. I really enjoyed answering those ones, so thank you for asking them. I hope you found this information useful and feel like you have some concrete just takeaways to support you in your health journey. We would love to see you at some of our other webinars hosted by some of our other amazing Food Smart dietitians on our team. So, just a great upcoming topic we have is going to be managing chronic conditions. So, if that is of interest to you, you can register at foodsmart.com/dietitiansdish. And you can also follow us on our social media. Let me flip so you can see that we are going to be at Hello Food Smart on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, just so you can stay in the know of different events and giveaways we have going on right now. But I truly appreciate your time and thank you for joining.
Thank you all. See you next time.